186. Self-consciousness is, to begin with, simple being for itself, self-equal, through the exclusion from itself of everything else. For it, its essence and absolute object is I, and in this immediacy, or in this mere being of its being for itself, it is an individual. What is other for it is an unessential, negatively characterized object, but the other is also a self-consciousness. One individual is confronted by another individual. Appearing thus immediately on the scene, they are for one another like ordinary objects, independent shapes, individuals submerged in the being or immediacy of life. For the object in its immediacy is here determined as life. They are, for each other, shapes of consciousness which have not yet accomplished the movement of absolute abstraction, of rooting out all immediate being, and of being merely the purely negative thing of self-identical consciousness. In other words, they have not as yet exposed themselves to each other in the form of pure being for self, or as self-consciousnesses. Each is indeed certain of its own self, but not for the other, and therefore its own self-certainty still has no truth. For it would have truth only if its own being for itself had confronted it as an independent object, or what is the same thing, if the object had presented itself as a pure self-certainty. But according to the notion of recognition, this is possible only when each is for the other, what the other is for it, only when each in its own self, through its own action, and again through the action of the other, achieves this pure abstraction of being for itself. 187. The presentation of itself, however, as the pure abstraction of self-consciousness consists in showing itself as a pure negation of its objective mode, or in showing that it is not attached to any specific existence, not to the individuality common to existence as such, that is not attached to life. This presentation is a twofold action on the part of the other, and action on its own part. Insofar as it is the action of the other, each seeks the death of the other, but in doing so, the second kind of action on its own part, is also involved, for the former involves the staking of its own life. Thus the relation of the two self-conscious individuals is such that they provide themselves and each other through a life and death struggle. They must engage in this struggle, for they must raise the certainty of being for themselves to truth, both in the case of the other and in their own case. And it is only through staking one's life that freedom is won. Only thus is it proved that for self-consciousness, its essential being is not just being, not the immediate form in which it appears, not its submergence in the expansive life, rather that there is nothing present in it which could not be regarded as a vanishing moment, that it is only pure being for self. The individual who has not risked his life may well be recognized as a person, but he has not attained to the truth of this recognition as an independent self-consciousness. Similarly, just as each stakes his own life, so each must seek the other's death, for it values the other no more than itself. Its essential being is present to it as the form of another. It is outside of itself and must rid itself of its self-externality. The other is an immediate consciousness entangled in a variety of relationships, and it must regard its otherness as a pure being for self, or as an absolute negation. 188. This trial by death, however, does away with the truth which was supposed to issue from it, and so too with the certainty of self generally. For just as life is the natural setting of consciousness, independence without absolute negativity, so death is the natural negation of consciousness, negation without independence, which thus remains without the required significance of recognition. Death certainly shows that each staked his life and held it of no account, both in himself and in the other, but that is not for those who survive the struggle. They put an end to their consciousness in its alien setting of natural existence, that is to say, they put an end to themselves, and are done away with as extremes, wanting to be for themselves, or to have an existence of their own. But with this, there vanishes from their interplay the essential moment of splitting into extremes with opposite characteristics, and the middle term collapses into a lifeless unity which is split into lifeless, merely immediate on opposite extremes. And the two do not reciprocally give and receive one another back from each other consciously, but leave each other free only indifferently, like things. Their act is an abstract negation, not the negation coming from consciousness, which supersedes in such a way as to preserve and maintain what is superseded, and consequently survives its own supersession.